Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. Every week, we bring in you stories of people who are improving the world around them, locally, globally, and digitally. Our club, the E-Club of Silicon Valley, is an online club, which is also asynchronous. That structure offers the kind of flexibility that I appreciate that hopefully helps those that have a heart for service and a crazy busy life an opportunity to participate and give back. If you're curious to learn more about that, head to our website at rotary.cool. A heart for service has also led our speaker today, Wayne, in over his 37-year journey with Rotary and beyond. Wayne is a long-serving member of the Rotary Club of Kamloops Daybreak, and he's going to talk to us today about his organization, Developing World Connections. If you want to read more about Wayne's history and bio, scroll up or down depending on where you're listening to us today. We appreciate you joining us on YouTube, our website, and podcast, which is my personal favorite. With that, Wayne, thank you for joining us and take it away.
Well, first off, hello, my fellow Rotarians. It's nice to be with you. I've never attended an e-club before, so this is a first for me in my old age. So I'm going to spend considerable time talking about the charitable organization Developing World Connections, but this is in large part a Rotary story. Before I was about to start my year as president of our relatively new Rotary Club in Kamloops, I determined my primary goal would be to have our club for the first time participate in an international project. So a few months into 1998, Hurricane Mitch happened, and along with a couple of other Rotarians, I found myself in the northern highlands of Guatemala, exploring the possibility of rebuilding a jungle village that was entirely wiped out by the hurricane. I'm just going to go down here. This little girl I'm holding here is Maria. She was the daughter of the chief of Nuevo Maravillas. This was in October, and when I first saw her, she was curled up in the mud, sleeping in the living area. When we returned to Nuevo Maravillas in February 1999 with 11 other Rotarians and a Rotary 3H grant, it was to rebuild all 33 homes in the village. Maria was sick with tuberculosis. After 2 weeks of building with the locals, on the day we were leaving, little Maria died. She's a big part of the reason that I continue to stay motivated about international service. Another reason that it was meaning so much to me was I was getting feedback from my fellow Rotarians on what the experience meant to them every night as we sat around an open fire and talked about how we were feeling about the day. People were sharing what it was meaning to them. And a couple of examples of what they said were a banker from Vancouver Island talked about how his entire focus in life had been about making money. And he said, committed that when he got home, he'd be changing that focus to being a better father and husband. Another Rotarian, originally from Alabama, talked about how this was the first time his heart had opened since he was involved in bombing a village in Vietnam. So it was meaningful stuff. And for me, it was meaningful. I realized how much the experience was changing me, the resilience of the villagers, the acceptance of life on life's terms, and their happiness in a time of such difficulty really stretched the muscles of my heart. And I knew this experience was something that I would need to continue. After 3 years of completing the rebuild of the community on a Guatemala bus, I asked another Rotarian what he thought of the idea of offering this opportunity to people outside of Rotary. Recognizing, of course, that Rotary isn't the only way that people have the opportunity. It's often through a church as well, but and there are a few other ways, but Rotary was what I knew. He was all for it, and the concept of forming a charitable organization was developed. When I returned home, had to do a little sideline. I was asked by the premier of our province to take on a leadership role with the Ministry for Children and Families. And after 3 years, when the project wound down, I joined a group of 5 other Rotarians and their spouses on a polio immunization trip to India. I shared the concept of offering the international volunteer experience to others outside of Rotary. And in 2004, with a board of 10 Rotarians, we formed Developing World Connections. My wife and I were on our way home from a family Christmas dinner and listening to the radio and heard news of the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami. And up until that point in time, Developing World Connections hadn't done anything. A couple of days later, I phoned our board members and they agreed with me that it would be a good time to go to Sri Lanka and see if we could kick off our organization. So 2 months later, with a group of non-Rotarians, we were building communities for families who had lost everything in Sri Lanka. Go through my slides here. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, you good?
Yes, we can.
One of the things, if you take a look at my bio, you'll see that I had the opportunity with Rotary International to be an evaluator and monitor for the Rotary Foundation and for the Canadian Rotary Committee for International Development. We used much of what I'd learned as a project evaluator to determine a sustainable model of project development with Developing World Connections. We partnered with respected, trustworthy nonprofits in the communities we served. We asked the communities what they needed most, and we committed to working side by side with community members over the long term. We very much followed the Rotary model of volunteers, the Rotary model of focusing on increasing food and water security, improving quality and access to education and training, and improving health, housing, and sanitation. The additional focus and the reason for volunteers, instead of just sending money, was to provide awareness of and build friendships with people of other cultures and to enrich the lives of our volunteers. Over the last 20 years, Developing World Connections has worked in roughly 25 countries and is currently focused on 3 countries in Latin America, 5 in Asia, and 2 in Africa. Our projects are very hands-on. We work with local people on constructing community projects like schools, community centers, greenhouses, wells, rainwater systems, medical facilities, and latrines. As well, we support education and health and women's programs in maternal hygiene through teacher training, small business workshops, and scholarships. Over 20 years, 3,500 plus volunteers have, that number is wrong, by the way, it's not 700,000 hours, it's 300,000 hours on 200 plus projects. And we've supported over 100,000 community members in the developing world. We've contributed substantially to the local economies through purchasing local materials and using local labor to help us with our projects. We pay local labor to join us along the way, by the way. So why not just send cash? Most importantly is the human connection for us. We from the Western world meet with, work with, and come to understand those whose lives are so much more difficult. Also, we're able to exchange technical know-how and skills that ensure the projects will continue to serve long after we're gone. And of course, the volunteers see that their donor funds are actually used as intended and they align with local priorities. This is kind of what a week looks like for the volunteers. The focus is always very much on spending as much time as possible with the host community members. Besides working side by side, we share meals with them, we visit their homes, and of course, we play with the kids. That's always one of the biggest highlights, of course, is playing with the kids. a few examples of projects that have had great impact on the communities. School gardens in Kenya have taught students and their families better nutrition and contributed to their financial well-being. Excuse me. In Guatemala, thousands of eco-stoves have been built, reducing pollution and workload and contributing to the health of the mothers and daughters who, of course, do all of the cooking. In Nepal, community centers, again, primarily for the benefit of women and girls, provide skills and leadership training. We've had many individual Rotarians join us over the years. And it did start out as being individual Rotarians and eventually moved into entire Rotary clubs who were joining us. And part of the reason they were doing that was to use our expertise to provide sustainable development projects that eliminated their need to do the research and to build those projects on their own. So we do have a really good connection with a number of Rotary clubs in Canada, a few in the US, a couple in Australia, and a couple in the UK. And I know it might be a little short, maybe a little long, I'm not sure, but that is kind of how International Rotary Service got introduced to non-Rotarians and to communities in the developing world through developing world connections. So thanks again for the opportunity, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful, Wayne. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to getting into those questions. You can go ahead and stop sharing your screen, and we'll introduce everybody who is on the phone today. And so I'll start with myself. My name is Nick Lagarde. I am based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and I am happy to be in the same province as Wayne, who is in Kamloops, British Columbia. Also on the phone, we have two of our members, Victoria out of Budapest and Lisa out of the Bay Area. And then we have previous District Governor Claire, who's based out of Newport, Oregon. So really thank you to all of you for joining us today, and look forward to getting into those questions. And the very first one actually is something that I was thinking about and Victoria was also curious about, which is just really on what basis do you select the projects? There's a lot of like secondary questions to that, but like how do you decide where to start?
So again, I was very fortunate to be an evaluator monitor for Rotary International. So I learned really good project development skills. And we start by taking a look at the country, which country we might want to work at next. And to some degree, that's based on where we think people might like to go. And then using the Human Development Index, we determine whether or not that's a country that we think we should be working in. And then it's a matter of contacting a number of not-for-profits, NGOs in those countries. And usually it starts with about 10 or 12 and hopefully gets narrowed down to about 3 or 4 before we actually visit those in country to determine which ones are doing the best work in their communities. It's a long-term selection process. It probably takes from start to finish about 3 months.
Wow. Okay. It kind of leads to it kind of chicken and egg, the idea that who's interested in going where. And so you have the people who are going to go with you, but also the need, where the need is based. It's just so I hear that correctly. Can pretty much be anywhere in the world that has that need?
Yeah, as long as they're relatively low on the Human Development Index.
Okay.
Like we don't choose, like there's a number of countries who've gone from being, minus 100 to now they're up in the top 10 or 20 or something, and we wouldn't be visiting there, obviously.
That makes sense. Okay. And one of the things that I really struck on and kind of ties into your selection process is about the markers of the sustainable projects. Like what makes these projects sustainable versus I know that there's a number that we've heard over the years that are not sustainable. What is the things you're seeking to make sure to include in that?
Again, I have to thank Rotary for that. One of the first things I found in being an evaluator monitor for Rotary was that the projects that failed, they failed because they didn't follow the Rotary guidelines. And the guidelines start with who has determined the need. A number of projects that I attended, a need was determined by a Rotary club or a Rotary member at a Rotary club in Montreal, Canada, and didn't go back to the community and say, "Is this what you really need?" Really good example was an X-ray building and an X-ray piece of equipment that hadn't been used from the time it was installed 16 years prior, because nobody was ever taught how to use it. And it was determined it was needed by an ex-community member who had moved to Canada and knew about X-ray equipment, but he never went back and taught them how to use it. So it was just a waste of time. So basically, it's a matter of determining, first off, does the community need it? Who has determined that the community needs it?
Yeah.
Is the community prepared to jump on board and support it? And is it something that we can use our skills at our training levels to help them understand how to use it best so that it's going to survive over the long term?
Wonderful. And that actually kind of leads into the next thinking I had, which was around the skills that you're bringing to the table. There's a couple of different questions I have, but the first is really about like, who should join you? Is it open to everybody? Do you want specific skills to join you?
Yeah, we'd always like skilled people, of course, to join us. But I would say most often participants have never picked up a trowel in their life. They might know how to use a shovel because they've used a shovel in the garden, but a cement trowel, forget it. They wouldn't have a clue how to use it. I mean, most of the building that we do, most of the work we do is building. And of course, most of it is brick and mortar. So it's a lot of it is unskilled labor that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, if we're doing a project, a good example, we did a solar panel project on a building that we built in Nepal. And of course, we had to go out and seek people from the solar industry to first off put the solar system together in Canada, and then go install it in Nepal. So there are times where we absolutely need people to with the skills to go with us.
Okay, that makes sense. And that actually leads to the other side of that labor equation where you said you find labor locally as well. Is that part of, how do you find that? Is that part of the project selection criteria?
Yeah, so again, I'll give you an example. In Ghana, we'd installed a number of wells, and of course, one of the problems with well installations, particularly in Africa, is that they get installed and nobody's taught how to maintain them. So, along with building the wells, installing the wells, we hired somebody locally to hire a bunch of local individuals and teach them how to maintain the wells. The last time I went back, which was probably 7 or 8 years after the project, the wells were all working perfectly, and everybody was so happy because they had a new skill that they didn't have prior to that.
Wonderful. That makes a lot of sense. Going on to the Rotarians, because this is so valuable to get people to have that exposure to the world. First, really, just from a cost and understanding perspective, what is a typical Rotarian or other volunteer paying for, and what are the kind of those upfront costs when they sign up for something like this?
So the volunteers pay their entire cost of going.
Makes sense.
Excuse me, which means, of course, airfares, accommodations, meals, and anything else they're going to do in country. In Canada, you get a charitable receipt for the entire cost. I believe you end up roughly getting 25 to 30% of that reimbursed. We are partnered with a nonprofit in the U.S. as well, so it's the same thing in the U.S. I don't know what the percentage is in the U.S., but just to give you an idea of the cost, to go to Guatemala being the closest country, it's probably in the 3,000 Canadian area, so about 2,300 American. And that's for 2 weeks of flights, meals, and accommodations. In the deepest parts of Africa, that's probably closer to the $6,000 area.
Okay. And really, this leads to the inspiration, which is how can we inspire more Rotarians to participate? I mean, obviously, getting the word out in this kind of forum is wonderful. How do you try and convince people this is the thing that they should do?
Yeah, I guess most of it is word of mouth. Um, when we started, we thought we would have thousands of volunteers the first year. And as I mentioned, I think we're only at something in the neighborhood of 3,500 volunteers over 20 years, which I still consider to be quite substantial. That doesn't include Rotary volunteers, by the way. That's just people outside of Rotary. So I think we're probably closer to the 4,500 with Rotarians.
That's wonderful.
It's a lot of people when they're asked if they would like to volunteer, they say, "Sure, I'll volunteer," and then they expect their entire cost to be covered because they might have some skills of some kind. And of course, that's not the way it works. So we Developing World Connections has become the largest international volunteer organization in Canada outside of Rotary or faith organizations. So we've got a bit of momentum happening, and I think as that continues, we have full-time representation now in the U.S. and the U.K., quasi full-time in Australia. So we're getting a bit more coming all the time, and really it's word of mouth, a bit of advertising, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and this leads to the beauty of what I've learned as my time as a Rotarian, which is the structure of our global grants and things like that. Do you find that you're able to leverage some of that structure of the Rotary Foundation, whether it's district designated funds or the global grant structure or any of that?
Rotary clubs have done that, yes. We stay completely away from it. Developing World Connection stays completely away from it. We do have a partnership agreement with Rotary International. And we consider there's too fine a line between conflict of interest. All of us being Rotarians, or most of us being Rotarians who are part of the organization and our Rotary clubs.
That makes sense, and I appreciate that we as a Rotary Club can sign up and decide that we're going to do this and work with you and to make that happen. So that's how right. the split happens. Okay.
Yeah, and of course you can apply for all of the matching grants.
Of course, yes.
We just stay away from it.
Well, and that's where we value what our district can help us with. So we really appreciate that our district 5170 does a great job of that. Just generally from like a structure perspective, one of the last questions that I saw come through was really from Lisa around the idea of like just infrastructure going in the first place. Are most of the places you go having electricity, or are there situations where you don't even have that? Like what is the setup that you run into? Probably broad.
So accommodations and meals are always one of our biggest concerns. Very, very early on, when I was doing all of the exploratory trips myself, excuse me, I determined that if my wife would stay in that hotel and if my wife would eat at those restaurants, all of our volunteers will be okay there. so we do need hotels, and I would say 90% of the time the hotels have electricity and clean running water that not necessarily that you can drink, but that you can wash with. Keep in mind that by the time we've arrived, we've already developed a relationship with our host partner. So they know that they have to have drinking water available to us. They know that the restaurants have to be prepared to accept us. They know that the construction materials have to be available on site, that we need transportation. It has to be available for when we're ready to go. And I would say that the selection process in determining the host partner is a big part of making sure the infrastructure is all in place when we arrive.
A monumental task. I can imagine that. How many people do you have in your organization today? Because I'm picturing like that is a focus of one person doing a lot of work. So there must be a few getting this done.
Yeah, so there's 13 employees
Wonderful.
and and three full-time volunteers that do all of the in-country visits to do semi-annual evaluations. Canada Revenue Agency insists that we evaluate our projects twice a year and to make sure that they're operating properly, and which we want to anyway. Excuse me. And when I say there's 13 full-time employees, there's kind of two sides to developing world connections. One is the volunteer side, and one is the fundraising side, so that we can do programs as well as projects. I think developing world connections now. Keep in mind, I'm fully retired, and I'm about 10 years away from the organization, but still quasi connected. I think there's probably at least half of the staff dedicated to corporate social responsibility programs with the corporate partnerships. And that's for the programs that are kind of separate to the projects.
Wonderful. Well, I want to just respectful of time want to begin that wrap up and want to say for everybody, thank you for joining us for this conversation with Wayne and the Rotary E Club of Silicon Valley. I'm thrilled that you are all here and you're listening, however you're getting to us. If you would mark yourself as attended in the discuss section, we really welcome comments for those who are watching after the fact and appreciate that we can make this happen with the technology today. Wayne, as we like to do, we want to hand it back to you for the final word. Take it away.
If you haven't had an international volunteer experience, if you haven't had your Rotary Club do an international project, I think it's mandatory for our personal well-being and our personal growth. Everybody needs to do it. Especially in difficult times like we're in today, the better we understand people of other cultures, other traditions, the better opportunity we have to advance toward a more peaceful world. So just do it.
I love it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.